Welcome to the Alcohol Minimalist podcast. I'm your host, Molly Watts. If you want to change your drinking habits and create a peaceful relationship with alcohol, you're in the right place. This podcast explores the strategies I use to overcome a lifetime of family alcohol abuse, more than 30 years of anxiety and worry about my own drinking, and what felt like an unbreakable daily drinking habit. Becoming an alcohol minimalist means removing excess alcohol from your life so it doesn't remove you from life. It means being able to take alcohol or leave it without feeling deprived. It means to live peacefully, being able to enjoy a glass of wine without feeling guilty and without needing to finish the bottle. With science on our side, we'll shatter your past patterns and eliminate your excuses. Changing your relationship with alcohol is possible. I'm here to help you do it. Let's start now. Well, hello and welcome or welcome back to the Alcohol Minimalist podcast with me, your host, Molly Watts, coming to you from a very brisk Oregon. It is cold, it is clear, a little windy. There's frost on the rooftops I can see, and I am going to say brisk. It's been brisk. I have to say it's been a beautiful January. Not a lot of rain, which I'm sure we will regret at some point because it's definitely something that we need here in Oregon. But for me, somebody who loves the sunshine, I have been loving it even when it's brisk. So today, if you are listening to this in real time, this episode is dropping on Monday, January 19th. It is Martin Luther King Jr. Day here in the United States. And it's also the day after what would have been my dad's 98th birthday. And if you've listened for any amount of time here on the podcast, you know how much I talk about my dad. He was a quiet but very powerful presence in my life, and his legacy continues to guide my work everywhere and my life, really. Today, I want to connect some dots between emotional regulation, alcohol habits, and this idea of freedom, a theme that resonates both on a national level through the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and on a deeply personal level through the lessons that I learned from my dad. So we're going to be talking about emotional freedom, what it is, what it isn't, and how alcohol plays into it, and how we can reclaim it or learn to become more emotionally resilient through awareness and action. So let's start with what emotional freedom is not. It certainly is not about never getting upset. It's not about never feeling the desire for a drink, and it's not about eliminating stress or discomfort. Emotional freedom is about not being ruled by our automatic reactions. It's about creating space between what you feel and how you respond. One of the most powerful quotes that shaped this idea for me comes from Viktor Frankl, and I've shared it often here and on Think Thursday. If you've never read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, I think that's right. Viktor Frankl is a doctor, a Holocaust survivor, and a psychiatrist. And he wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." And that is the core of emotional freedom. For many of us, especially those of us working to change a habit like drinking, that space between stimulus and response has become very narrow. And the drink has become part of the go-to reaction. You feel stressed, you pour a drink. You feel bored, you pour a glass of wine. You feel lonely, you reach for a cocktail. And we start responding without even realizing the emotional connection. The habit is so ingrained, it feels like the answer. The truth is, there are always other options, and we just have to learn how to see them again. We have to rewire the brain so that it learns that we are actually the people that control how we feel. So let's talk about the science behind this. One of the most consistent findings in alcohol research is that people often drink not because they want alcohol, but because they want to change how they feel. This is known as emotion-focused coping or emotional avoidance. In fact, low distress tolerance, which is just a fancy way of saying the ability to feel uncomfortable without reacting, is actually a major predictor of problem drinking. Your brain, especially the lower brain, the limbic system, is wired to seek relief from discomfort, right? We've talked about the motivational triad. Avoid pain, seek pleasure, and do it as efficiently as possible. Alcohol provides fast relief. It dulls anxiety, it blunts stress in that therapeutic dose, it creates that euphoric feeling, and it can certainly numb sadness. But that quick fix creates a powerful association in your brain. Feel bad equals drink equals feel better. That relief, of course, is temporary. And over time, as we continue to practice that same pattern, it reinforces the belief that you need alcohol to handle your life. What we know from neuroscience is that habits are formed in that basal ganglia, the part of the brain that automates behavior. And once a pattern is established, your brain just definitely defaults to it, especially under stress. So if you've ever poured a drink without thinking about it, that's not because you're, weak-willed. That's your brain doing exactly what it's been trained to do. Of course, the brain is also plastic. It can change. Neuroplasticity is real. And that change happens when you start creating space between the stimulus and the response, the urge and the action. That's where emotional freedom really begins. Hey, just a quick break to talk with you for a minute about Sunnyside. You hear me talk about it on the show often, and it really is my number one recommendation for a mindful drinking app. People use this tool in my groups, in my classes, and they tell me all the time how much they really appreciate the fact that Sunnyside is a very positive reinforcement. And what I mean by that is that when you track your drinks, and let's just say you planned for one drink and you ended up having two. If you're honest and you track that second drink, you're not going to get a message that shames you in any way or reprimands you. You're actually going to get positive reinforcement for tracking a drink that you didn't plan on, and some ideas and some suggestions for maybe going and grabbing a snack or getting some water. Sunnyside is like having a coach in your pocket, and I love that. You can try it for a 15-day free trial. Go to www.sunnyside.co/Molly to get started today. As I mentioned, yesterday would have been my dad's 98th birthday. He passed away now about just over 3 years ago, Thanksgiving, November 2022. And on a day when we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. and his legacy of strength and dignity, I am reminded of the quiet leadership my dad modeled. My dad wasn't a flashy guy. He didn't lead with anger, and he never overreacted. One of the quotes he taught me as a teenager was from Adlai Stevenson, and it's, "You can tell the size of a man by the size of the thing that makes him mad." And that really stuck with me, not just because it sounded wise, but because it literally described him. He was authoritative, but he was never angry. He was calm, he was steady, and he was focused on what mattered. And that example showed how I began to understand emotional strength. Not as the absence of emotion, but as the ability to respond with intention, even when emotions run high. So, what does this look like in your real life? Let's say you've had a long day, you're overwhelmed, and your habit voice is saying you deserve a drink. Instead of reacting, you pause. We practice the PB&J around here. You pause and ponder. You name the feeling. You think about it. I feel exhausted. I feel unappreciated. I feel alone. That pause is the space, right? And in that space, you breathe. You take some deep breaths. That's the B, the P, B, and J. That's the breathe. Take some long, deep breaths. That helps calm the autonomic nervous system, and that is real. And you reflect. You ask, what do I actually need right now? Will this drink help me feel that? What's a different way I could meet this need? Right? The J stands for just 10 minutes. That's how we navigate urges. We promise we're going to do it for just 10 minutes. And that's not deprivation. That's not willpower. That is a retraining, right? That is learning how to pause. And that is freedom. And the more often you practice this, the more you rewire your brain to expect new sources of relief, of new rewards, and of new ways to support it. I talked about this more in my book, Breaking the Bottle Legacy, in the chapter called Figuring Out Your Feelings. And I go into detail about how we use alcohol to avoid discomfort and how my dad's emotional steadiness helped me realize that strength isn't about controlling things, it's about owning them. You can't change your drinking unless you're willing to feel your feelings. Not perfectly, not all at once, but more honestly and more often. And that is something that you can practice. So here's a reflection prompt for this week. What does emotional freedom mean to me right now? Not for the long term, not for the future, not for anything else, but right now. Write it down. Sit with that. Ask yourself, where do I feel reactive? Where could I create more space? What would it look to respond instead of escape? Right? Because in all areas of our life, different moments, you feel more emotionally resilient in one area of your life and less emotionally resilient in another area of your life. You know, I'm doing mostly dry January, and I have a group that I've been sharing daily videos with and daily private podcasts. And in those daily videos this week, I shared that I had kind of a rough week, and I actually read from the book Breaking the Bottle Legacy and this chapter to them in a video because it was a good reminder for me too. And I really want to be someone who practices emotional resilience, who practices emotional freedom, who builds up that skill set. And it is a skill that you can practice. You get to choose how you respond. And that doesn't mean that I didn't feel things. It meant that I paused long enough and I allowed myself to think about it and really choose how I wanted to respond. Now, I've got a lot of resources over on my website, www.mollywatts.com. And one of them that I have just recently reopened is Drink Less Success. And it's my 30-day course that is grounded in neuroscience and habit psychology. And it is really created to help you build a more peaceful control. It's very self-paced. It's very easy to take part in. And you do get a copy of my book, the audio copy of my book, Breaking the Bottle Legacy, in that program. So if you'd like to check it out, I will put a link in the show notes. You go to mollywatts.com/drink-less-success. That's where the URL, but I will put that in the show notes. You know, this journey isn't about streaks, like even a 31-day alcohol-free streak, if that's what you're going for here in your dry January. It's certainly not about feeling shame or regrets when we drink off plan. It's about freedom. It's about emotional freedom. It's about that space between stimulus and response and learning how to capture that power and really grow in that and experience more emotional freedom. I hope that you are having a fantastic January. I hope that it's going really well, no matter what you're doing. I hope that you've used this month's different podcast episodes. I've been talking a lot about the January effect and fresh starts and dips in motivation. I've been talking about identity leg, and today, emotional freedom. That emotional freedom comes from sustainable change, creating it for the rest of your life. That's what I want for you. As we wrap up this week, I just want to say thank you for being here. Quietly, over the last couple of weeks, we passed a real mile mark here at the Alcohol Minimalist podcast. We passed 500,000 downloads. That's pretty amazing. 500,000 times people have listened to this podcast, at least. And that's just amazing to me. So thank you. Thank you so much. Until next time, my friends, choose peace, and I will see you on Thursday. Thanks for listening to the Alcohol Minimalist podcast. Take something you learned from this week's episode and put it into action. Changing your drinking habits and creating a peaceful relationship with alcohol is 100% possible. You can stop worrying, stop feeling guilty about overdrinking, and become someone who desires alcohol less. I work with people in 2 different ways, and you can learn about them over at my website. Go to www.mollywatts.com/workwithme or reach out to me directly. Shoot me an email, molly@mollywatts.com. We'll jump on a call and decide what might work best for you. This podcast is really just the beginning of our conversation. Let's keep it going. If there's one thing I know, it's that change is way easier when you stop trying to do it alone.